That's what I'm going to be speaking to now. I will be talking eventually about this school, our results as they came through 2016 and how we're tracking at the moment. But I do want to put it into a wider context. So what I'm planning to do today is share with you some new research and analysis I've looked into that I've only just been able to finish with last year's NCEA results coming in. I've got three sort of broad ideas that I want to eventually tie together to create that wider perspective. I want to address each one individually. The first one is this word authentic, which was in the ERA report. And it was brought in generally just talking about our results as a whole. ERA were convinced that our student measures were strong and the outcomes for our students as a whole were strong. But I thought it'd be worth sharing with you where this word authentic actually came from. It came from a discussion specifically about our level 1 results. And that's actually important because I had a frustration that if you compare our level 1 results numerically with just about any other cohort in this region or in this country that's comparable to us, our numerical level 1 results are lower than everybody else's, sometimes quite considerably lower. And I was frustrated in the conversation with the ERA inspectors because I was saying the way that is described, the sort of the way that people view exam results, they were described as being poor, below average, weak, worrying. And I said, we need another word, because I was convinced that it was none of those things. And the ERA inspector actually pretty much stopped me and said, the results are authentic. Which I said, right, I'll take that. Because that was. So at the time, this is last year, I was able to convince them that our level 1 results were not weak. There's actually a strength behind the numbers that we're getting. And they were convinced of that too. And I'm going to come back to that idea later on, hopefully before the bell goes. The second idea I want to talk about is how we view student progress. Now, I am absolutely convinced that on a very broad level, all of these three things in combination should be used in measures of our student progress as a whole. However, historically, not just in this school, but everywhere in the country, that's basically been it. That's all we've looked at. Now, if we go back to this, our student role could be a measure of the strength of the school, of the academic progress of the school. Usually, though, it's kind of dismissed as being some kind of PR exercise. It's the result of competition with our local schools fighting over those students that have got a choice between 2 or 3 options. I don't think it is. Now, I haven't actually factored student role into my analysis because, quite frankly, it's too difficult. It's very, very time-consuming. But it is worth mentioning that over the period of NCEA, our school role has risen by 1/3. I remember starting here when we were in the low 800s, 830, 840 students. We're now tracking towards 1,200. Now, that is, I think, an indication of something, especially if you bear in mind that that's faster than our population growth as a whole. And often we've had periods where the available students in this region have dropped, but our role has increased. So that's as much as I'm going to say about it, but I think it is important, it shouldn't just be dismissed. Retention rate is often ignored entirely. And I haven't really seen it in any form of measurement at all. And again, when you discuss retention rates, it seems to be included or discussed as being a feature of the pastoral care of the school, as part of the culture of the school, not as an academic outcome, and I think it absolutely is. So, we're looking at those three things together. And as I said, I wanted to share some research, and the third point I want to look at was target setting. Now, I've been charged with writing the academic targets for this school, and I've handed those to Gary as accepted. But it's actually been a feature of education across the country ever since NCEA started. Every 3 years, 5 years, schools have had to write down what they believe their targets are going to be, hand them into the ministry, they get sent back, they get discussed, write reports, put in a file, and it's just kind of happening. But that's all these targets are based on. And not only that, historically, the majority of the NCEA period have been based on participation data, not roll data. So you've even got these other pressures where you've got this sort of skewed sort of world view of student progress that sort of permeated the whole of the education system. So I've changed the targets, and again, at the end I come back and show you how I've changed them and how, again, I think that they are fitting in with this idea of an authentic measure of student progress here. The other aspect of targets is to use the stats term, the methodology of the target setting. The more I've looked into it, the less than impressed I personally am about how it's been organised. Again, it's not just the nature of the data that they're using for the targets, but the target setting has tended to be kind of aspirational. Even an example is a recent set of targets that actually came from the Ministry of Education. And they were sent here, and the methodology was, we want it to be 85%, we're currently at 70%, so next year we'll go 5% increase, then we'll do another 5%, then we'll do another 5%, and then everyone will be happy. I haven't got time to go into how woeful that is as a method of target setting, but basically it's completely unrelated to reality. It's just an awful way of deciding how we're going to progress the system. And I don't have time to go into all the details, but there are 4 things that happen when you have target setting or a view of data that way. The first one is the whole idea of target setting the use of data becomes a compliance issue. It's just something you have to do. You do it, you get it done, you file it, and then you leave it. And that's the end of it. The other outcome is that it sort of removes data from our everyday life. We develop a cynicism about the use of numbers, because fundamentally it's based on poor practice, so everything that's related to it is going to be poor practice, so we just, again, push it to one side and leave it as though it's not connected to us. We also have this issue of not really knowing what we're doing, to be blunt. We instill poor policy, we instill opinions, and then we don't actually measure or compare them to each other. So we don't know if what we're doing is correct. Brilliant. It's just we just fall back on an opinion system of analysis, which I think can be quite damaging. So that's the background. I'm going to try and tie all those ideas together. And the way I'm going to do it is as I said, I looked at some analysis, and what I've done is I've looked at all the decile 8 to 10 co-ed students in this country, going back to 2004, so it's about 15,000 year 11 students each year, roughly. And it's the second largest group in New Zealand. It's only decile 4 to 7 co-ed students that are a larger group. And it's also traditionally been one of our high retaining cohorts. So there's some recent trends that I've noticed with these students that I found very, very interesting. And we'll go into it. But first of all, let's just assume that this is actually reality. The pass rates are the best and only way of assessing progress. Because if that's your thought process, that's the paradigm you're working in, there is a lot of data out there that would support that and make it seem like a compelling worldview. So I just want to show that. Oops, too far, sorry. There we go. So all I've done here is going back to 2004, is I've taken the average level 1 pass rates, roll-based pass rates for that cohort, and then a year later measured the level 2 pass rates. So it's very simple analysis, and the correlation is incredibly strong. So again, this would indicate what a lot of people would say is that if you've got an increasing level 1 pass rate, you're going to get an increasing level 2 pass rate, and everyone's a winner. The other thing to notice, although this is a scatter diagram, because we've had this sort of unrelenting year-on-year improvement in level 1, it's just gone up and up and up every single year, you can actually see this pretty much as reality over the last 14 years. Because it actually has, with I think 2 of these points that are on there, but it basically sweeps through in time, so you can actually read it as the history of NCO. So that actually makes the current thinking that I've encountered very, very compelling. This idea that as the level 1 increases, your level 2 pass rates will increase. So obviously, keep pushing along this line here, and that's going to keep going up. And that's understandable, and I think that's intuitively how a lot of people will see what's going on. And like I say, we're not alone with it, the whole country sees it that way. If we move on to level 3, so this is 2 years after, we actually have the same pattern. It's not quite as strong, but it is still a pretty strong correlation. Level 1 will lead to level 2, level 3 improvements. And again, it's in time series pretty much, so we keep pushing, we're going to move along. And that's where we're at, if pass rates are the only measure of success. If we move on to UE, things start to change a little bit. Now, there is no correlation. It's not weak, there's none. It's practically zero mathematically. So level 1 has no connection to university entrance at all, either in recent years or in fact in earlier years. There's just no link. Now, there are lots of fairly understandable arguments that people could proffer for why that is. I mean, the split between academic and non-academic courses, not everyone's at school till you go to university and so on and so forth. And I accept that there is a lot of truth in those ideas. But one thing I just want to throw out there, and this goes back to previous presentations, is this idea that under NCA, with all the choices and preferences and freedom that people have within the system, this is the first time with UE that we actually have restrictions on what students can do. So we've actually taken away the choices out of the system. And as soon as we take away the choices out of the system, those decisions and behaviours that happen when they're 15, 16 years old just fall apart, and there's no link to what happens when they're 3 years down the track. So I just leave that idea for the moment, this idea of the economy ranking. And now I want to jump back to this idea that retention rates are now important measures of student success. So the next slide is this one here. Now what I've got, it's still the level 1 results. They're still improving greatly across time, so from 2004 up to 2014 is the last group here. But look at the shape. What's happened here is when we had these relatively lower NCA results at the start of the NCA system, we had retention rates down about 60-65%. So these are the students who are still in school as year 13s. As the NCA results increased, we got this peak. And then in the last 2 years that I've been able to measure, it's fallen back in line with where we were in 2004, 2005, 2006. So in fact we have, despite the fact you're on this on this idea of level 1 success, the best results we've ever had, we haven't improved the number of students who are actually staying in school, which I think is counterintuitive. Most people assume if you've got the qualification, you're more likely to stay within the system, you're more likely to keep progressing through, but it's not happening. Now you'll notice that I've only got to keep the male results here, and it's a bit of a given, it's understood that male results tend to be lower than female results. So if you look at the female results, we see exactly the same pattern, which surprised me. And in fact, not only do we see the same pattern, but the retention rates in recent years are the lowest we've ever had. So, highest level results, fewer students staying in school. Which I think goes against most people's expectations, as I said. Now, what we're seeing here is this idea, and I understand that what I'm about to say may cause a bit of angst on some people. It causes me a little bit of angst. It goes against my sort of usual left-wing socialist views. But what we're seeing here is this kind of optimum level of performance. We're actually getting into a range where we actually get the best outcomes, and simply moving everyone through actually starts to get negative results. And interestingly, it works for both males and females. Now, you can't see the scale though, but this is another thing that I found very, very interesting. If we accept this idea of an optimum range, for boys it's between about 64 and 72%. Role-based pass rate, that's where we get the best retention outcomes. For females, it actually starts higher than 72%, which is the upper limit for boys. And the optimum range for girls is about this sort of 73, 74 to about 78 or so, roughly. Now that to me I found very interesting because it goes a long way to explaining or shining light on the fact that within co-ed schools, the separation between male and female results is at its greatest. It's actually narrower between single-sex schools. So this to me gave, I mean I haven't been able to go down too far down the path, but this idea that they're in the same schools, they go through the same systems, they have the same teachers, the same courses, the same expectations, and then boys are falling away, I think this could at least go some way to explain that. there's this optimum performance level, and it's different for the two groups who are actually going through the same process. Okay, so I'll continue. Hopefully that's clear. If I move on now I'm going to combine those pass rates and retention rates. So if we're looking here for the boys at level 2, these are students who have stayed at school and left with a minimum of level 2. And again, because we're now bringing in the likelihood that a child stays at school, we're starting to see maximum performance and a dropping off in recent years, despite the fact that this group got the highest ever pass rates of that cohort. And then we flip it to girls, and it's the same but worse. In fact, this I'm finding really quite fascinating, because I've talked about this idea of an educational economy and these ideas of choices and preferences. I'm seeing, tentatively, the beginnings of what you could call a recession in the educational system. We've had, in terms of credits, equivalent to the free money, 2007, 2008, and now we're getting actually negative outcomes as a result of that in these high attainment cohorts. For level 3, it's not quite bad, but that pattern is still there of this recession for the boys, and again for the girls. So overall, we're not doing as well for those cohorts as we have done in the past. And then interesting, this is with UE. When I showed you beforehand, there was no pattern, there was no correlation in the data. Once you start to bring retention in, a pattern does emerge. Not entirely sure what it is, because this is all still quite new to me, but there is something there. So this idea, it reinforces to me at least, this idea of combining the retention rate to measure the health of the student body and the pass rates to measure the health of the student body in conjunction actually gives you much better insight as to what's happening. But we're still seeing this falling off. And then, just to finish off, it's the same pattern with girls, but at separate points in the level 1 achievement position. So that's the new data. There is a lot of stuff that can go in there. I'm sure people have got questions, but I do want to sort of try and tie these ideas together back about Nelson College. Now, when we talked about authentic, right back to the beginning, this was the data we're looking at. I've just updated it for this year. I'll just quickly explain how it works. This blue line here are our level 1 pass rates, all role-based. The orange line up here are our level 2 pass rates. This silver line is our level 3, and then this yellow line is our UE. Now this is just the exam rates. And we, as a school, have no correlation from level 1 to down the track at all. And the reason is because, unlike anywhere else in the country, our level 1 results have actually fallen. They've actually dropped. But I don't see that as a weakness. There's a few things. First of all, if you go back to that idea of optimum performance, these level 1 results here sit exactly in the centre of that optimum range that I was talking about, right in the centre of it. And not only do they sit right in the centre, these last 4 years' results, they are all within half a percentage point of each other. Now, as John Francis says, the problem with random numbers is you never know really if they are or not. But I don't think that's random at all. I don't think you can have 4 years of pass rates from 4 different cohorts of boys and have that similarity of result. I think there's something systematic in the way we're doing our business. And that is then flowing on down the track. We may see or think that there's a slight drop in level 2, but that's, as I said, over a period where we've had a third more students in the school. And the same with our level 3. Now the other thing, if you haven't seen this before, is this is all time lapse, so each vertical point is one whole academic cohort. So this, for example, is the level 1, level 2, level 3 and UE of the boys who are here from 2014 to 2016. Which is why we've got this sort of raggedy end, because we only have level 1, level 2 and level 3 from the previous year. But I will fill in those bits in time. So we've had role change, and then there's also retention change to bring into how our figures work, which I'm going to do in a second. But just to make it clear, that may not seem like any great change as a pass rate. That's actually one of the highest level 3 pass rates of male cohorts in the country. We have 65% pass rates, based on a retention rate of over 80%. So for every 200 boys or so that start in year 11, more than 160 of them still here at level 3 and year 13, which is incredible. It's incredible for most schools. For boys' school, it's absolutely astonishing. And so, getting close to the end, this is our school. And I'll try and explain what's going on. And this is also where targets and target setting that I've been doing have been brought from. This dotted line at the top, that's our retention rate. And it's going up. We haven't seen that falling off that we've seen in the 8 to 10 co-ed schools. And also, incidentally, we're seeing the same pattern in the female single-sex schools from decile 4 up to decile 10. And they're traditionally our highest performing cohort schools, and they're seeing that falling off. But we're not. Our retention rate is staying up. This is our students in school as year 13s and finishing with a minimum of level 2, and you see it's rising. This is our level 3, and it's actually rising. Once you bring in retention rate, it's rising. It's going against those national patterns that I'm starting to see. The only one that seems to be falling is our UE, but interestingly, this is when the Train Building Centre was opened up. And this was also when the latest changes to UE were brought in, and they were far, far highly restricted. So in fact, although it's a fall, I think it's actually, it is genuinely in keeping with our multi-schools within the school policy. And I don't think it's actually anything to be worried about. The main thing is this overall health of these overall outcomes tracking upwards. And so I've got these dotted lines, and it's these lines here that I'm using for our target setting. I think they're achievable, I think they're realistic, they're based on where our students have come from, and I think they're reasonable based on where they appear to be going. So, I could keep talking. I'm noticing the time here, so I'm going to stop there. But hopefully, I've done two things. One, I've put our position as a school in greater focus, and it is a positive focus as well, I'm convinced. And also, hopefully, I'm making you more and more aware that data and numbers really do inform. And if you don't have the data, all you've got is an opinion. And I think we're in a position now to actually move forward with policy, actually genuinely look at what we're doing right and what we can genuinely improve upon without just shrugging our shoulders and just charging off to windmills. Because, as I've said before, we're doing okay. Okay? We are. So, I've stopped there. Any questions, please jump in. I realise we're getting close to the bell, but thank you very much.
Nice speech at the beginning and anticipation, but thank you, Kieran. I think we appreciate the incredible amount of hard work behind that. Also, it's incredibly thought-provoking, but also